Good day.
So here we are in the Icarus ultralight. We're going out to do a couple circuits. We're going to make a demonstration video here on how we do the circuits. So we're taxiing out the runway 25 as it's into the wind, most favorable. It's a little bit windy today, so it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, but nothing that the Icarus can't handle, I suppose. We're taxiing Bravo. I'm using the rudder pedals to taxi the aircraft. You might notice that I have a hand control here. That's what I'm using that. I don't have the use of my legs, so I use hand control on this side. But so before we get on the runway here, we'll want to make a good look, make sure there's nothing coming. We didn't report any traffic on the radio, but that doesn't mean there's nobody coming in, so we're going to make sure that we have a good look here. 6 radio, Zulu Alpha Charlie, backtracking 25.
Zulu Alpha Charlie, roger.
Kingston's one of those small towns you see while flying an ultralight. Sometimes there's planes coming in without radios. It's a good thing always to check both ways.
When you're at a small airport too, sometimes it's good to do a circle check. So back on the taxiway, you just circle around and then get a look all the way around the sky. Make sure there's nobody coming in. 5. So as we get to the end of the runway here and get lined up, I can do my pre-takeoff checks. I'm going to check everything left to right, top to bottom. So if I have a look at all my flight instruments over here, everything looks normal. My altimeter set to the current setting. Compass is turning and the brakes are working fine. Over here on this side, we got our engine instruments on the right. We're within limits here. Our oil pressure is good. Oil temperature is warm. Our water temperature is good, and we have half a tank of fuel, so 2.5 hours of fuel. Check my flight controls. And we'll go top to bottom. Flaps are set. All the switches are on. We got our mags on. Chokes off. Everything's good to go. You ready for takeoff? Alrighty. So for the takeoff, we're going to go full power. I'm going to start with the stick about halfway back. Plane's going to want to pull hard left, so we're going to use the right rudder, nice constant right rudder to keep it center, down the center line. And once that nose wheel comes off, I'm going to hold it there until those back wheels come off, kind of pitch forward a little bit, build up my airspeed. So we get to 65 knots in the climb out. So here we go, full power. And start with that stick back. So right rudder, keep it straight. Nose wheels off. Back wheels are off. And I'll pitch slightly forward here, build my speed up. 65 knots. As we climb up, I gotta keep on that right rudder, keep that nose straight because of all the torque and the slipstream and everything from the prop trying to pull us left, make us fly sideways, so I gotta stay on that right rudder. I'm just gonna keep the climb going up to at least 500 feet above the ground. So here at Kingston, we got 300 feet above the ground. I'm going to climb up to 800 feet before I make my turn onto crosswind. Alright, there's 800 feet. I can go ahead and take those flaps off now. And I'll make my left turn nice and square with the runway. Don't want to go too steep in a climbing turn. Our stall speed increases as we bank steeper, so we don't want to risk stalling the aircraft, especially this close to the ground. So just try to keep it under 20 degrees bank or so. I'm looking back at my runway now until I'm square. And I'll keep climbing up to our circuit altitude, 1,300 feet before I level off. I'm going to lead off the altimeter a little bit, about 50 feet earlier. I'm going to start going nose to cruise and power to cruise. And we're all settled out here now. I can trim the aircraft out. so that I can just take my hands off the controls and let the plane do the work. We'll make our left turn here onto the downwind, and I'll make my downwind call to Kingston Radio. Kingston Radio, Wendy's Alpha Charlie, turning downwind for runway 25, stop and go.
2 Alpha Charlie, roger.
Alright, looking at the runway, nice and parallel. And I'll do some downwind checks now, left to right, top to bottom. So I'm looking at everything, all my switches are still on, gauges are still good. Check that we have brake pressure, our seat belts and doors are still on. And now, all we gotta do is wait for the runway numbers there to be halfway between the wing and the tail. That's about 45 degrees off their shoulder. And I can start setting up for my descent. Always looking out for other traffic on the downwind or on final. So there's about halfway between the wing and tail for the runway numbers. I'm going to pull the power back to 3,000 RPM in the Icarus. I'm going to slightly pitch up just to slow the aircraft down a little into the white arc. That flaps 1. Then I'm going to trim the nose up so that I can take my hands off the stick and it holds 55 knots, my approach speed, without me having to do any work. Should be able to just let the aircraft do its own thing. This is our base lag now. From base to final, turning final, line up with the runway. We want to be around 800 feet or 500 feet above the ground. If I'm higher than that 800 feet, I know I'm going to be a little high. I might want to take a little more power off, and I'll have to repitch the aircraft when I make that power change to keep that 55 knots. If I'm a little lower than the 800 feet, I'll add a touch of power, and I'll have to pitch up a little bit to maintain that 55 knots. Today is a little bit gusty, gusting to 19 knots. A good thing to do is add about half of the gust factor to your approach speed. That gives you a little margin of error. If you get all of a sudden you get a tail gust, you're not going to risk stalling the aircraft. Oh, we're on final here. I'm going to call final. Thanks, Radio Wendy's Alpha Charlie's final for 25, stop and go.
Zulu Alpha Charlie, roger, wind 250-11, gusting 19.
2 Alpha Charlie. And my only job here is to keep it locked on that center line. Locked on the airspeed, which I'm going to pick about 60 instead of my regular 55 just because of the gustingness today. And I'm looking at my runway, the numbers, and if I see them starting to rise up on the windshield, which I kind of see them slowly moving up on the windshield, it means they're going to be a little too low. If they're sinking underneath me, that's too high, and if they're staying locked on one spot on the windscreen, that's right on the money. So I'm just going to add a touch of power and repitch my nose up slightly to keep that 55, 60 knots. And now they're starting to slightly sink underneath. So I'll just take a little bit power off. And I'm just locking on that center line, locking on the airspeed, making slight adjustments in the power to bring us in on a good approach here. Airplane's pretty much trimmed out, so I don't have to do a whole lot of muscle work on the stick. Just keep a nice loose grip. Keeping those wings level, and I'm keeping the nose straight with the runway with the rudder. We're for sure going to make the runway now. I'm going to take the power off. I'm going to look deep down to the end of the runway, way into the trees. And about 5 feet off the ground, I'm just going to slowly bring the nose up. And as we slow down, I'm going to keep checking the stick back and bringing that nose up. And holding that nose wheel off as long as I can. Until eventually we don't have enough speed that the nose wheel is just going to set itself down nicely. Got to keep flying the airplane even on the ground and use the rudder pedals to keep it straight on the center line. And that's basically one quick circuit